Hello and welcome to the Nerdiest podcast. I am Charles the Nerdiest, and today we are going to be talking about the DCU, the DC Cinematic Universe, episode 19 of the Nerdiest podcast, and that is the topic. We're going to be talking about Green Lanterns, the new DCU projects that are up and coming, things that I'm excited for. We're going to be talking about a bit about James Gunn and what things he's announced and teased. We're going to be talking about the upcoming Batman film. We are going to be talking about Man of Tomorrow and Supergirl. Woman of Tomorrow, right? I think it's just called Supergirl. I'm not sure. I think it's just called Supergirl. We are also going to be talking about past projects that I really enjoy in the current DCU timeline. I'm talking about Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, and obviously Superman 2025. I think this is a very exciting topic. I think I'm very hyped to see how these films and how this franchise and how this universe gets built. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the DC Cinematic Universe. Stay tuned. So let's get right into today's episode. So many of you guys may know what DC is. Obviously, DC Comics has been around for ages. Batman's been around. Batman's DC. DC is like Marvel. It's like a company of characters and franchises and stories, right? But the DCU it stands for DC Cinematic Universe, right? So that's like the films. So we haven't had a connected universe really like the MCU, as big as the MCU. You know, the MCU has been going on since early 2000s, right? And it's still going strong, very strong today. But the DCU sort of is a little bit blurry in the sense that we haven't had a fully connected universe with, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Robins, we got all the Bat family set up. You got Joker. I think in the perfect universe, in the perfect DCU universe, you would have 3 Superman films, all be very successful, all introduce Superman villains and do it really good justice, and then do the same with Batman, do the same with Wonder Woman, Flash, or Aquaman, have all these big 3, the big characters of the DC superhero franchise, have those 3 big, maybe not 3, but have those big standalone films that introduces their character, and then have, after all those films, build up like an Avengers level, or like an Avengers Endgame level, event set in the DC universe. I'm thinking Darkseid, Doomsday, some big threat like Thanos, and then you could just do a Justice League film, There's so many possibilities and so much money, I think, to be made with a successful DC universe. Or a DC cinematic universe, right? So yeah, we previously talked about, on this podcast, we have talked about Supergirl before, but we've also have talked about Avengers, Doomsday, and the future of the MCU, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think you should go check that one out if you're into Marvel and DC, but if you're into DC, I think this is the episode for you. Because we're going to be talking about James Gunn's DCU. We're going to be talking about the past projects that have already come out set within that universe. Peacemaker, Creature Commandos, Superman. And then we're going to talk about the next most recent projects to release. Supergirl, Lanterns, some projects that may not have been announced, some things that we could speculate about. I'm talking about the DCU Batman, which we haven't got much news about that, but we have some sort of speculate. We can speculate, right? So I think that would be pretty fun to do. But I want to start this episode off talking about the projects that we've already had within this universe. But I also want to talk about some, maybe, I wouldn't say failed DC universe, cinematic universes, but we did have a previous DC cinematic universe. We had the Scott Snyder Batman, the Scott Snyder Superman films, Man of Steel, obviously, and we had Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman, and that whole Justice League and Superman versus Batman film, that whole sort of gritty, dark side, side of these characters, right? I wouldn't say it was failed, but it definitely wasn't what I was hoping for. It felt a little bit rushed in the sense that they rushed into that Justice League film and they didn't really set up any of the characters. I would have liked to have seen, we had Man of Steel, and then from Man of Steel, it went straight sort of into that Batman versus Superman, which I don't think was fair for these characters and for, Henry Cavill's Superman and for Ben Affleck's Batman. I think they're very good castings, and I think they're very good, decent actors, right? I just think the direction the writers and directors, and Scott Snyder specifically, took these characters in a direction that didn't really make sense. He didn't flesh them out. He didn't, give them their own. He only gave Superman, Man of Steel, a pretty run-of-the-mill movie, which was setting up his character, which it makes sense. But when you want to watch a superhero film, you don't really want to go over the origins 10 billion times. But if you're a fan of Scott Snyder's DCU, if you will, I think it's called the DCEU, or is that the new one? I'm not quite sure, but it's DC Cinematic Universe, right? Then be a fan of that franchise. It's not bad. I don't think it's necessarily a failure. I just think it didn't meet my expectations for, you have these characters from the comics that are very fleshed out and have history. They have longer history than like Marvel comic characters, I think. Obviously Superman being the first superhero ever is a big deal, and you need to do it justice on the big screen. But yeah, for me personally, I just didn't think Man of Steel or the Justice League approach these characters in a way that I think is doing them justice. Yeah, I don't know. But we're not going to be talking about Scott Snyder. I'm not just going to be hating on Scott Snyder this episode. We're going to be talking about James Gunn. James Gunn is the new CEO, or sort of head runner of the new DCU, right? So, he was the director of the first sort of big blockbuster DCU film with Superman in 2025. I love that film. I would never stop glazing it. I think it's awesome. I think it's perfect. I think it takes the character of Superman and sort of bends it and twists it into a cinematic masterpiece. It's not a comic book character anymore in this film, which, I think you can take that one way with Scott Snyder, making it a super realistic character, right? But then James Gunn, he sort of takes that comic book character, makes it more comic booky, but then as you make it more comic booky and more sort of extravagant, it loses that comic book and it becomes a cinematic Superman film, right? I love that film, but that film was the first sort of big blockbuster, big characters. So, the Holy Trinity, I think they're called, or what are they called? The DC Trinity. That's Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, right? So I think I heard somewhere a while ago that they were planning on doing the first 3 big DCU projects to be Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman, right? I think that would make most sense. People would get hyped for that. And it sets up a good universe that then you can then flesh out with, characters like the Flash, Aquaman, then you could set up the Bat Fam, the Joker, all that Rose Gallery, and then you can combine it, like I said, in a Justice League film. But, so yeah, Superman 2025 by James Gunn, masterpiece in my opinion. If you don't like it, I don't really care. Go watch Man of Steel if you like that one. Each to their own, I say. But that wasn't really the first project in the DCU. We're gonna have to go back a little bit and talk about, Creature Commandos and Peacemaker. So Peacemaker is a TV show. They're both TV shows. One's animated. Creature Commandos is an animated DC project. And Peacemaker is obviously live action. But it's a TV show. That's what separates it from, you know, these big blockbuster Superman, Man of Tomorrow and Woman of Tomorrow films. And it's what's Lantern's going to be. It's what's Lantern's going to be. So Peacemaker and Lanterns are going to be very similar on that wavelength of a TV show, right? I don't know about the vibe of the show or how it's going to aesthetically feel like. But yeah, they're probably going to be pretty similar when being received, right? Obviously, episodes come out weekly or monthly, whatever. But yeah, let's talk about... So in the first sort of timeline for this new DCU is Creature Commandos. But I wanted to talk about Peacemaker because it sort of isn't the first project in this DCU. The official first project is Creature Commandos timeline-wise. But I think Peacemaker is such a great way to enter this new DCU, and it makes so much sense to watch or talk about it first. So we're going to talk about Peacemaker. So Peacemaker, I think, was really awesome. The first season was amazing, but that came out before the whole James Gunn ordeal, and it was sort of ran by, was it James Gunn? I think James Gunn was attached to it in season 1. I'm not quite sure about how much, if he was director or what, but yes, season 1 came out in like, I want to say 2021 or 2022, I think. But that season 1 was a great one, but it acted as a standalone story in this DC universe, you know. Peacemaker is this sort of vigilante, no filter, he's sort of like Deadpool, but a little bit more grounded and doesn't break the fourth wall, whatever it's called. He's a little bit more serious. Obviously, he's played by John Cena. Amazing actor. I think he's perfect for this role. And I'd love to see him in more projects in the DCU. But season 1, obviously I said, takes place before this new DCU universe comes out. So that's going to leave it a bit tricky to do season 2. So when season 2 came out, it was sort of like, okay, how are they going to implement this into this new DCU? And I'm glad they did implement it and not just like drop season 2. I think that would have been such a letdown. When season 2 was coming out, it was such a good time. I'm remembering that intro, and it was so fun to watch every week or every so often, you know. I think the episodes are really strong, and I think it dives into some very challenging topics, you know. Season 2 starts off with a banger, though. Peacemaker kills himself from an alternate universe, which is very sort of like clumsy and sort of sets up the whole of season 2. Yeah. But we're talking about season 2. Let's talk about the ending of season 1. So in season 1, originally, they have 2 endings. They remade the ending of season 1 for the start of season 2. It's a little bit confusing. But in season 1, there was a sort of like post-credit scene of the Justice League. Scott Snyder's Aquaman, Scott Snyder's Wonder Woman, Batman, and Man of Steel, Superman. They were sort of silhouetted. I don't know if it was actually, you know, Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck and Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot. But they were sort of silhouetted. And Peacemaker walks by them and he says,
"You're late, you fucking dickheads! Go fuck another fish, asshole!" I'm so fucking sick of that rumor.
"Go fuck another fish, asshole," to Aquaman. And it was a funny little gag at the end of season 1, and I think it was really awesome. It just shows me what this Justice League could have looked like in other projects. And it didn't really give me much faith. It just didn't seem, because there wasn't these standalone, obviously there was loads of standalone Aquaman films, and there was two Wonder Woman standalone films. But I'm talking about Batman. Batman's a key player. He needs his own film. It can't be Batman versus Superman as a first Batman film. It needs to be a standalone. You need to flesh these characters out and, you know, give us another Man of Steel, give us another Batman, and I think you would have had a good baseline for a Justice League and a DCU. especially with Peacemaker being an addition. But then in season 2 at the start, they sort of did it, with, James Gunn's DCU. I think it's pretty funny, to be honest, to see the difference, because he quite literally replaces, Henry Cavill's Superman with David Cornsweet's Superman. Just like that, and it's kind of funny. So they replace, like I said, Henry Cavill's Superman with David Cornsweet, who is the new Superman in the DCU James Gunn film. They also replace, I don't know who they replace, but they add Millie Alcock's Supergirl. She's going to be having her own film this year, 2026. They also get, I'm trying to think now, Mr. Terrific. It's basically the people who we've already seen in this DC universe. It's not the Justice League. It's the Justice Society, right? Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl, it's a bit tricky because we don't have Batman in the DCU. We don't have Wonder Woman. We don't have these key players who were in the ending of Peacemaker season 1, right? We don't have Aquaman. We don't have these people to put in this ending. So they sort of just set up that whole Justice Society. Oh yeah, and there was Metamorpho as well. I forgot his name. But yeah, I think that was a good idea because it then shows that this is connected, right? If you kept that sort of, it would have made sense if you kept that Scott Snyder Justice League scene. I think it was a good idea to remove it. But yeah, the rest of the season 2 of Peacemaker was awesome. I love Vigilante and I love John Cena and that whole story with his father in the alternate universe, I think was really well done and it was such a good time as well. One thing that I've seen people talk about online is James Gunn and how he maybe favors some actors, right? So we see lots of returning actors and actresses from his time at Guardians with Marvel. I'm thinking Matt Mercer. What's his name? No, it's not Matt Mercer. I'm thinking some sort of his brother. He stars in a lot of his films, and he's in this new DCU as I can't remember his name, but he's in the new DCU. But I don't really understand why people get a bit upset about that. I think as long as he's bringing these characters to life in a good way, and the actors are doing their bit, that's what I care about. I don't care about who he casts, and if he has that sort of close circle of actors and actresses that he likes to utilize, that means he knows what he's doing and he knows who's good for what role, right? He knows these actors really well. He has a personal relationship with them. And you can't say that about everyone because he did cast new people as Superman and Lois Lane and Mr. Terrific and all these people. There are lots of other people who he has cast as new faces in the DCU. So, after Peacemaker, let's talk about Creature Commandos just briefly. It's an animated show. It's got sort of like Frankenstein and Frankenstein's wife. It's got that sort of, it's like a ragbag? I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what I'm saying. Ignore me. It's like a handful of mischievous people. I don't really know. That sort of blur the line between hero and villain, sort of anti-heroes, right? And it sort of connects to Batman with Clayface. Clayface makes an appearance, which I think is really interesting. Think of it a little bit like a spin-off of Suicide Squad. It takes place sort of after that Suicide Squad, but the Suicide Squad is obviously not a part of this DCU. That whole sort of thing is Scott Snyder's thing. I'm gonna just call it Scott Snyder's DCU. It's probably not his film, but it's sort of within that universe, right? That they were trying to set up. I'm not really opinionated on those films. I don't really know. I think it's okay, I think Suicide Squad is always going to be less popular than Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman, right? That's why you need to do those first and not Suicide Squad, But John Cena was actually in those films, which I think is a nice connected. You could sort of look at it as like a possible, you've got to take it with a grain of salt, this new universe. You can watch these films, right? And if you want to, if it's a good one, go for it. If you want to make up your own story for these characters, go for it. I think that's what that's what's sort of implied, is you just gotta just ignore everything and go into this new DCU with a fresh slate. You can watch Superman 2025 without any prior knowledge of DC, of Batman, or what Superman is, because it basically describes what it is, right? Yeah. So after Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, we then got, very quickly I thought, Superman 2025 in 2025, July 11th, my birthday. Let's go, guys. Awesome birthday present. Was definitely a highlight of my day, going to see that on my birthday. I went to go see it about twice in the cinemas, and I've watched it countless times at home. Yeah, I think it's a really good film. I think it's strong, it's unique, it's flavorful, it's a good time, it's just fun. Go watch it, go check it out, because I really enjoyed it. That's Superman 2025 by James Gunn, but it's sort of James Gunn's, it's like him just saying, let's do it. Let's start with a Superman film, which I think is so brave and so awesome, because we haven't had someone go like that for a few years up until this point, right? The last Superman film we had was Man of Steel in like 2014, 2011. What was that? I don't know. But, someone coming into a DC universe and the first film that they make is Superman tells me that they're understanding this universe already. They understand that the fans want no filler shows, no filler films, and no faff. They just want Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman, Lantern, Green Lanterns. We want the Justice League eventually. We don't want it straight away. We want to wait. Don't rush it, perfect it in your own way with awesome stuff. I can't wait to see the future of David Cornsweet's Superman. Lois Lane in that film was awesome. That whole universe, I think, is just so good. It's just so good. I love Crypto. I love Mr. Terrific's role. I love Lex Luthor. Oh, such a highlight in that film. And they are planning, it's got renewed for a sequel, Man of Tomorrow, right? So that's 2027. I don't want to talk about it too much, because I will be talking about it closer to release on this podcast. But yeah, that looks good. It looks like Lex and Superman are going to be teaming up, which is very exciting for sure. But yeah, I can't wait for that. It's awesome to know that we're going to get, Superman back on the big screen again. If we can make it to 3 big blockbuster films, I will be a very happy bunny, because we haven't had 3 super successful Superman films in like decades, ages. But yeah, so that is pretty much the DCU up until this point. So we've had Creature Commandos was the first sort of project set in this timeline. And then we had Peacemaker season 2, or Peacemaker, the whole show, I guess you could say. That as the second project in this timeline, this DC timeline. And then we had Superman, obviously the first big blockbuster film. Now we're getting into some upcoming DCU projects. We're going to be talking about Supergirl, which is the next project to come out in 2026, June, I think. I think it's the 26th of June, 2026, right? We'll talk about that in a minute. We're also going to be talking about some TV shows. So, Lanterns have been trending online recently. This is why I've made this sort of podcast episode, is due to the fact that there's some controversial news surrounding the trailer of Green Lanterns, or Lanterns, which is the Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, Jon Stewart, and these characters coming to the DCU. I think it's sort of a bit controversial in the way that they're doing it, is sort of like a noir sci-fi superhero film. It's sort of like not sci-fi, but sort of like a Earth set show. I don't know much about Green Lanterns, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Let's talk about Supergirl for starters, because one thing that I really like with this new DCU, the one thing that I really, really enjoy is the how the new DCU is grounding these heroes, Superman, Supergirl, Lanterns, possibly Peacemaker. They're grounding these heroes, quote unquote, to be more humanized and becoming human. I think these films just show, all the past projects is trying to make this Superman look like a Superman, right? It's trying to make Supergirl look insanely unnatural and just super, right? But these films, they don't even try to do that. The whole goal of these films is to humanize Superman, humanize Supergirl, give these characters emotions and feelings, and I'm thinking of that quote from David Cornsweet at the end of Superman 2025, when he's talking to Lex in the Lex building, and he's just sort of emotionally letting out an epic speech, that it just reminds me of why we need superheroes. Is not to remind us to be super and to be a superhero and try to fly, and that's not going to work. It's to remind us to stay grounded, to stay human, and to stay emotional, and that even Superman can cry, right? I love that film, and I love how they're taking the DCU in this direction. I think that's what sort of Scott Snyder was trying to do with the DCU, with his DCU, is he was trying to ground these superheroes to be, humanized. But they sort of humanized them way too much. They lost that sort of superhero epic comic bookness of it. Whereas James Gunn, Superman, has those funny moments. It doesn't take itself too serious. I say that all the time about Scott Snyder's Superman. It takes itself way too serious, and I don't like it. But yeah. So, let's talk about Supergirl 2026. It's going to be the next project, or the next big film in the DCU. I think James Gunn is connected to it. I don't think he's directing it. James Gunn does have sort of that creative control over these films, I think, because he's the CEO. He's the sort of herald of the new DCU. But the trailer looks absolutely incredible. We have Lobo in the new DCU. And it just seems like they're taking characters from, for example, Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and now Lobo and Supergirl. I think that's really interesting to me, is that they're not just doing a Supergirl film, which, it might be branded as, and it might be what people really, really want, is they want a superhero girl? What? A super girl film, right? But when you bring these characters to live action, it doesn't hurt to have a cameo or two in these films. They're such big films that you need to sort of make it valued, you need to sort of add more into these films, If they were to just do a 1-to-1 to the comics of Woman of Tomorrow, it would be fine, but it won't be memorable in the sense that it doesn't compare to other films in the DCU and other films in Marvel, for example. Marvel has all these cameos. You need to keep up with that sort of trend of, people making an appearance. And I'm all for Lobo being in this film. I think it's really exciting to see that they're fleshing out not just the world of Metropolis and Gotham and all these things, but also space and Lobo and Supergirl and Krypton, right? Supergirl 2026. If you want to go listen to me talk about that for a little bit longer, Go watch my episode on it on the Nerdiest podcast. It's like episode, I want to say 6 or 7. 6, 7. No, I'll never do that again. But yeah, go check that out. I think it's a pretty solid thing. We go over some sort of awesome stuff I found in the trailer. But yeah, I think that's going to be awesome when it comes out. I don't think it will be as big as Superman, because obviously Superman and Supergirl have that fan base, right? A lot of controversial things have come out from the fans. I think fans, you can't take other people's opinions for yourself. You got to ignore it, but I will touch upon it because it's kind of unavoidable. We live in a world where it's so common to see people hate on things that are different and things that challenge their sort of norm. So I think Supergirl being a star in her own film, and it isn't just a woman running around, you know, half naked and flying across the stars trying to, you know, attract that male or female audience. I think it's awesome that they're grounding, like I said, they're grounding these characters to be humanized. So in this film, it seems like it's taking that sort of defeated woman. She's a defeated person at the end, sort of at she's at a low point in this film, it seems. In the comic, she was, and I think they're just gonna expand that upon that, right? She turns 22 or 23 in this film, and she's a very sort of, she just doesn't care anymore, and I think that's going to be awesome to see, as we've seen Superman, who's very caring and has a passion for saving people, and he's trying to save all these people in that film, Superman 2025. It's going to be awesome to see the spectrum of Superman and then Supergirl, and how they are so different, right? I would love to see Superman show up in that film. I feel like he has to, right? If you're going to do a second film with David Cornsweet Superman, like I said, we just talked about how cameos are very, very common in films, and they're sort of like a trend, right? It's probably like 90% sure he's going to be in this film. At the end, you know, how Supergirl came into his film, he's probably going to do the same with her. Maybe she will show up in Man of Tomorrow, right? I think that would be really interesting. I can't wait for this film. It's going to be the film of the summer. I can feel it. It's going to be sick. It's going to be awesome. Let's talk about the next DCU project I'm excited for. Is going to be the Lanterns. So we have talked about the Lanterns in this earlier bit of the segment of this podcast episode. I'll go over it again though. So Lanterns is going to be a TV show centered around Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, centered on Earth. So Hal Jordan is the Green Lantern that I think of. He has this history of being the Green Lantern that many people know, right? Jon Stewart, he's sort of like the, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know much about Green Lanterns. So the ratio between me reading Marvel and me reading DC is absolutely insane. I've only sort of really just got into some Batman comics. I'm reading Batman by Grant Morrison. But, you know, I have read Superman and I have read Batman before, and I know sort of what they are and what they stand for, but I haven't really read Green Lantern. That's the thing. So I'm going to try and talk about this the best I can, but if I do mess up, you know, I apologize. This is why, though, this show is important, is because the lesser known characters of the DC universes need to have that moment to shine. And if they don't do it well, you know, people won't read these comics. So yeah, let's talk about the controversial sort of trailer that the Lanterns released. The Lanterns released this trailer that is, it's sort of like it's difficult to talk about because it looks like they're going down a direction that is maybe not what the fans were expecting. The fans were expecting, green lanterns, not just lanterns, green, right? They were expecting more green sci-fi vibes. This sort of looks like a grounded, sort of like realized TV show, like The Walking Dead or something like, like Lost, if you've seen that show. It sort of looks like, you know what I'm talking about, like how it looks a little bit too normal and not a superhero TV show. I think the casting is great. Obviously it's a older Hal Jordan, and I think, Jon Stewart is going to be the sort of main focus of the lanterns in the DCU. I think it's interesting. I think it is interesting to see what... I don't really want to form an opinion on it before it comes out, because that's what a lot of people have done online, is they've seen the trailer and they say, oh, this suit looks awful. It doesn't look green enough. It's disgusting. I don't think you should judge. This might be a hot take, but I don't think you should judge a project off of its trailer. I think trailers do sort of ruin the fun of waiting, right? It builds hype for sure, but if it's not a good trailer, people are not gonna... They're gonna dog on it. They're gonna dog on it, and... is that really worth it? I don't know. But for me, I gather an opinion when the thing comes out, right? I don't hate on it, and I don't exactly love it, until it comes out. And if it's dog water when it comes out, I won't hate on it then either. I'd be opinionated on it for sure. I'd say it's, not the best. But if it's really good, I'd like it, and I'd praise it, because then we'll get more. But yeah, some people online have been saying, specifically about the suit. The suit design looks over-designed, musty, sort of brown, right? It looks brown. That's what they're saying. It's not looking green enough. There's no sci-fi elements to the trailer. And I think if you watch that trailer without knowing it was Green Lanterns, you would just think it was something else, because... The ring is present. I think that's interesting, because obviously then the powers are going to be present. If you have the ring, you have the powers, right? I don't know. I don't know much about Green Lantern. I don't know about Hal Jordan or Jon Stewart. So I can't really be opinionated on it. If you're a super fan of Green Lantern, I could see why you would be a bit upset about that. I think there's not enough green. And it's just making me think if they're doing it on purpose. There's got to be a sort of reward, right? There's got to be a reward. I can't speak. A reward for watching that show. I think maybe at the end they could do like a sci-fi green action scene or something like that, and then that would just revive the whole show. But there's got to be a reason why it's so brown and unsaturated, right? I don't know, man. It's interesting to talk about. Maybe this project has humanized these characters a little bit too much. But like I said, I don't want to talk about it because I want to wait until it comes out. And then I will form my own opinions on that, So obviously Guy Gardner is going to be a part of this, Lanterns. I feel like I would love to see the Lantern's corpse in this film, but I don't know how much, of what extent we will see this. It's scheduled to air on HBO, which is where Peacemaker was aired, in August 2026. And it will have 8 episodes. But maybe the reason why the series is sort of maybe being not very well received is because it was in development way before James Gunn became co-CEO of DC Studios. So it was redeveloped to fit that DCU. So it wasn't scrapped necessarily, but it might have been redeveloped and changed drastically. That might be the reason why, or it might not have been changed drastically. You know, it may have been like this the whole time, and that's why it's sort of not you compare Lanterns to Superman, there's so much color in the Superman film, so it just doesn't make sense to me, and it's why there isn't enough green in the trailer. I don't understand where we've gone from really great and then not so great, not looking too good, right? It's going to be a part of the Chapter 1 Gods and Monsters, which is obviously setting up, you know, Superman, Lanterns, the sci-fi side, I think, is what they're trying to achieve in this Chapter 1 of the DCU. You know, it's going to be following an experienced Hal Jordan, a sort of rough around the edges. I think I like that vibe of him, you know, but I would have loved to have seen a younger Hal Jordan. I don't know if they're going to do that in the DCU or if they're going to stick with this older, experienced Hal Jordan. And it also follows a new recruit, John Stewart, who is a younger Lantern, right? It's interesting because you've got this experienced Lantern and then the younger John Stewart. I wouldn't mind if they focused on John Stewart's character and shone him in the sort of Hal Jordan light, and John Stewart became that sort of Green Lantern, like who is known as the Green Lantern. He is in the Justice League, you know. Usually they sort of have Hal Jordan and John Stewart. Hal Jordan is sort of like the master and John Stewart as the Padawan, right? But they're both really powerful in their own different ways. But I would personally love John Stewart to take the torch off of Hal Jordan, if that makes sense, or the ring, you know. Well, not, you know, the torch. You're passing down the torch is what I meant, you know. It says here that they will investigate a murder in Nebraska, which leads them to darker mysteries and reckonings. So it's sort of like a drama, detective, sort of science fiction superhero film or series. So it isn't necessarily, it kind of reminds me, the premise sort of reminds me of Mandalorian. Is that a bit of a stretch to say? I mean, possibly, but it just reminds me of Mandalorian in the way that it's sort of, I don't know, it just does remind me of Mandalorian. I'm not sure. I'm not saying like Hal Jordan's Mandalorian and then Jon Stewart's Grogu character. I mean, maybe, I guess, but a little bit weird. Anyway, let's talk about something else. More DCU. Obviously, it's exciting, right? It's exciting that we're actually going to be getting projects, DC projects. So, Chapter 1, obviously, Gods and Monsters. For television, we were supposed to be having a sort of Booster Gold show. So we've had Creature Commandos, Peacemakers, Lanterns is the next upcoming TV show sort of thing. I don't know how much of these will come out, but we were supposed to have a Booster Gold. Obviously, Booster Gold, friends with the Blue Beetle, right? Is his name? Blue Beetle, yeah. That would be interesting. I think that would go very nicely into the Gods and Monsters chapter. That sort of vibe. And then we will also be getting a Wooler series. I don't know how much of these are going to come out. We've had some really awesome projects so far in the DCU. Obviously, it's been very selective. We've had Superman, Peacemaker, Supergirl coming up, Lanterns coming up. We got Man of Tomorrow next year, and we've got Creature Commandos. Some more untitled sort of series, TV shows coming out. We obviously have Creature Commandos Season 2, which is in production now. Obviously, animation takes ages, but we also have had sort of announced in June 2024 an animated series focused on Blue Beetle. It was revealed to be in development with Warner Bros. So obviously Blue Beetle is a very big sort of DC character. We had that Blue Beetle film, and I think it's meant to sort of build off of the film and tell its own story, but lead to that film star coming back, if successful, right? I think that would be awesome to see. I just want more sort of standalone characters, you know, if that makes sense. The more that they can build upon this universe and build upon these characters is awesome, right? Then obviously Mr. Miracle was announced, a series following the journey of Scott Free / Mr. Miracle, the best escape artist and member of the New Gods. Obviously this is Jack Kirby's DC work. I think this would be so awesome. It'd be an animated adult series, and it would adapt the Tom King comic miniseries, right? With Big Bertha, Big Barda, right? I think that would be really awesome to see. I really love Mr. Miracle. He was my dad's favorite. And obviously Jack Kirby in the DCU would be awesome. I think that's awesome. And then there was a untitled, so we will also hopefully be getting an untitled Jimmy Olsen series, which is leading me into talking about spin-offs that of characters that we've already seen in the DCU. I think it would be awesome to see a Jimmy Olsen series, because then it will open the idea of maybe a Lois Lane series, or a, Mr. Terrific gets his own film or series, and then Hulk Girl and Guy Gardner, all these characters could then be fleshed out. Or it could be some really niche characters, such as, I don't know, let's go for a really weird character, let's go with like Lex Luthor could get his own series, for example, anyone that opens the door for you to then have anyone in the DCU that we've already had, or that we've already seen, right? They get their own show. So obviously we've had Superman 2025, Creature Commandos, Peacemaker, Supergirl is coming out soon. I'm very excited. But let's talk about some of the Elseworlds. So if you don't know what Elseworlds means, is DC Elseworlds is a project, or any project that did not fit into the current DCU shared universe. It just allows you to, I think this is what Marvel needs to do. It allows you to make projects that are sort of maybe drastically different, right? So it allows you to have, Batman 2022, with Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson as Batman, and they can exist as their own films, separate from the main universe, right? And it just allows you to have really awesome stuff. Obviously, Batman 2022 is awesome. The Penguin, that spin-off series was awful. Awful? What? Was awesome. I love that. Gunn briefly considered integrating Pattinson's Batman into the DCU, but Reeves opted to keep his plans separate from that franchise, which is obviously, I think that would be better for that franchise, right? So any project that doesn't fit into the current DC universe is just called an Elseworlds story, and is enjoyed on its own, right? Separate from everyone else, which I think is awesome. Yeah. Right, guys, let's talk about one more thing that I want to talk about on this episode is the next sort of big character that they're going to be making a film of. And it's none other than Batman. So we also talk about Matt Reeves' Batman and how that's in Elseworlds. So the main Batman of this universe is getting his own film, which is currently in development, right? It's probably going to start filming soon. It's called, the title is, the working title of it is Brave and the Bold. The Brave and the Bold, right? Which is obviously very familiar with Batman. It will include members of the Bat family, including Bruce Wayne and his son Damian, as a version of Robin. Gunn said the film would be a strange father and son story about Batman and Robin. So obviously they're setting up this film to be inspired by Grant Morrison's run in 2006, where he introduced Damian as Robin, who is the love child of Ra's al Ghul's daughter. I forgot her name. Valia. What's her name? Talia al Ghul, right? And Bruce Wayne. So Damian Wayne is Bruce Wayne's son. And I think that would be really awesome to tackle in a film. We haven't seen a live action Damian, right? I'm not quite sure. But that would be really awesome, right? A strange father and son a strange father and son story would be so cool. Yes, I would have loved to see Tim Drake. Yes, I would have loved to see Dick Grayson and Jason Todd, Red Hood, you know. But it does say it explores the members of the Bat family, not just Bruce Wayne and Damian. So it could sort of start off with Bruce Wayne and Batman having Tim Drake as his Robin, right? You know, Nightwing is, well, Dick Grayson is Nightwing now, and Red Hood is, Jason is Red Hood, right? It's already pre-established, which I think is awesome, because loads of Batman films try and explain it and try and explain these origins of all these characters, and it just wastes time, because if the people who are sitting in cinemas know what Robin is, you know what Robin is, right? Which one is one, right? Which one is what? Gunn said the film was based on Grant Morrison's 2006 run in the comics. Ben Affleck was confirmed not to be reprising his DCEU role of Batman, while Matt Reeves' version of Batman was confirmed to continue separately from the DC's version under the DC Elseworlds label. The Flash director Andy Muschietti was hired to direct the film in June 2023, with his sister Barbara co-producing alongside Gunn, so that tells me that James Gunn is very present throughout these films and has a lot of influence within these films, right? Co-producing it, but it isn't his film, you know. I think that's good, because then it would get boring if the same guy directed the same films. The development of the film has been postponed by December 2024 because of his other commitments, and not to conflict with the Batman Part 2. So we haven't got a lot of information about this new Batman film, which is a bit of a shame, because looking at Superman 2025, this film has the potential to be generational. There's a lot more characters tied with Batman, and there's a lot more of a sort of universe built up within that, and there's so much history that Batman has gone through, right? I want it to be awesome. I want to be amazed, right? Like Superman 2025. I don't want it to be overly dark. I want it to have lighter moments. And a lot of people are saying, oh, you know, they're introducing Damian in this film, so Bruce Wayne himself is going to be old. Which I think is not true, right? You know, they're basing this off of the Grant Morrison run, where obviously Bruce is old in that comic run. He is a sort of older, mature man, and he's like the father up to this son. But you could definitely implement Damian when Bruce is, you know, in his 30s. Or in his late 20s. It doesn't necessarily mean that he has to be 50 to have a child, and it to not be weird, right? I don't know. I think people just don't open their eyes to the possibility that there are new writers for this film, and they're going to rewrite that comic. It's not going to be adapted, right? Would I like to see Joker in this film? I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm going to say no, because we already have Bruce Wayne and Damian Wayne. So it's going to be Talia as well, and it's going to be too much. We're going to have the Bat family. It's going to be way too much if you have Joker in this film. I would love a Joker cameo. I would love that. Which villain would I like in The Brave and the Bold? Not the Joker, not the Riddler. I think the Riddler's overused. He's been using Matt Reeves. The Batman, right? I think, doesn't necessarily need to be a villain. Ra's al Ghul could be an awesome villain for this first film because it has that Damian Wayne sort of upbringing story. So yeah, that would be awesome. But I don't think it really needs a concurrent antagonist, right? Obviously it is a superhero story, but I think the antagonist could be Damian if done right, because he is sort of that brat vibe, right? I don't know. I think it's looking up to be awesome. And if they keep the title, The Brave and the Bold, would be awesome. I love that. That is Batman the Brave and the Bold. We talked about that. That is going to be probably a while away. I wouldn't say 2027. It might be announced in 2027. I don't think it will release in 2027. I don't know if they've started filming. I don't know if they even cast the Batman actor. I bet they're actively working on it. But like I said, I don't think they will reveal any details on this film until maybe late 2027. Batman is a big character and they cannot mess it up, so I hope they take their time on it, right? They don't mess it up. And I also hope they don't mess up the relationship between Batman and Superman. I don't want a Batman v Superman. I don't want a Batman who doesn't like Superman. I want them to be friends. I think that would be awesome, right? Do you think it's possible that we will get a Wonder Woman film, like in between the first Superman, in between, Superman 2025 and Brave and the Bold? Nothing has been announced of the Wonder Woman film, but they did say that they were going to be focusing on Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman in the DCU as the first of big blockbuster films, right? It would be awesome. I would love that. Because then after they done Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, they can do a Justice League right there and then. You don't really need to flesh out the rest, because then you could do a Justice League, and then flesh them out after, right? I guess that makes sense. But yeah, that's probably one of the most highly anticipated films. A new Batman film is always fun. And we're just being spoiled because we have Batman, by Matt Reeves to look forward to, and Batman Brave and the Bold with Damian, and that Grant Morrison comic book run is awesome. So I can't wait to see that adapted in some way, right? So we have talked about past DC projects that abide within the new DC timeline. We have talked about Lanterns. We have talked about Supergirl, Batman Brave and the Bold. We have talked about some announced TV shows that might be coming, but might not be. You take it with a grain of salt. Nothing's really confirmed nowadays. Anything can go. We didn't talk about one of the most awesome TV shows that I'm looking forward to is Clayface. So Clayface, as you guys know, has been filming, or has filmed. I think it's wrapped, right? And they're in post-production, I think. I think it got delayed, right? I'm not quite sure. I'm pretty sure it got delayed. Let me have a little look. But that Clayface, looks pretty good. I think it's a film, right? Oh man. So, yeah. Clayface was supposed to be releasing in October 2023. What? October 23rd, 2026. And obviously Clayface, he was present in Creature Commandos, and it's going to be a body horror story about an up-and-coming actor whose face is disfigured by gangsters. And as a last I can't speak today, bruh. As a last resort, he turns to a scientist who transforms his body into clay, obviously. Clayface, right? It's going to be sort of like a body horror, violent film. Right? And sort of humanize this villain as a sort of human, right? And make us feel sorry for him. It's not confirmed if it's a DCU project or an Elseworlds film, but, you know, it's gonna be awesome either way. It's gonna be like a horror film, which is awesome. And I would be happy to have a terrifying Clayface in the DCU, because then it would mean Clayface versus Batman was destined to happen, right? But yeah, that looks awesome. I've seen some set designs. I think it looks awesome. There's also, in June 2025, Gunn revealed that a new film featuring Wonder Woman, separate from the television series Paradise Lost, was being written and slowly progressing. When DC is reportedly fast-tracking the film. So, as we are talking now, they are actively working on projects that they may not have announced, and is slowly progressing to have it out. I think it will just become, I think they've got it under sort of a tight fist, right? They've sort of understand what they need to do, and they're doing it in a pretty good way. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman all coming out. And then we also have characters like Clayface that are getting some insane light shined on them. Why would we make a film about Clayface? He's not really that big of a character, but that's why I like it, because that's exactly why I like it, is because he's not a big of a character, but he will be, hopefully, after this. It would be awesome. So we've talked about some upcoming DCU projects on this episode, guys. Which one are you most excited for? Let me know. I've loved talking about the DCU. I love James Gunn. I love his Guardians of the Galaxy work. Awesome stuff. It's so exciting to be a DC fan and a Marvel fan. Obviously, we have Avengers Doomsday and Man of Tomorrow, Supergirl, Lanterns, Clayface, all these films supposedly coming out. But yeah, we have talked about it. Let me know your thoughts on this episode. Let me know what projects you're most looking forward to. I think my personal most excited project is going to be always the next one that comes out. Supergirl, right? Man of Tomorrow, Batman, Brave and the Bold, Wonder Woman. I'm excited for it all. I love superheroes. I love DC as much as I love Marvel as well. And yeah, I think it's so exciting to be a fan of DC and a fan of superhero films, right? So yeah, we have talked about it all. That is the DC universe, and I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode 19 of the Nerdiest podcast on Spotify. I've been Charles the Nerdiest. Stay nerdy, stay awesome, and peace out.